Okay, thank you for everybody for attending here and watching in Cyberland there. Please welcome to the General Government Subcommittee meeting of Thursday, April 29th here in the chambers. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 5th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of General Government is being conducted via hybrid remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted in the council chambers, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to attend this, who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching Southbridge Cable Access Channel 192 or by the remote information noted below on the website, specifically on the town's website. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website at ci.southbridge.ma.us as soon as we're able. And it's also being broadcast live and will be recorded by Southbridge Cable. A roll call vote is required for all votes taken under this order. The first thing we're going to do is roll call. So Councilor Marchetti?
Present.
Ms. Shea?
Present.
Ms. Clements?
Present.
Councilor Ryan?
Present.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Councilor Steves, I'm present. Item number 2 is to review and discuss the fire chief's request from a fire overtime account transfer to the Town Council Reserve in the amount of $25,000 to replenish Town Council Reserve funds due to FEMA reimbursement received for COVID-19 costs. I don't have anything I don't specifically have any backup for this item, at least not an email. So I guess, should this go to you there, Mr. McCall, or should I send it to Paul?
I can address it
You
if
can
you
do it.
don't
Okay.
mind, Councilor
Karen?
Steves. This is to return, well, let me back up a little bit. There was a transfer from the Town Council Reserve to Fire Department overtime.
Okay.
I don't know if that was maybe back in February or March. And that was due to the timing of the FEMA reimbursements. So this is to replenish the Town Council Reserve because the money has been received.
Good. Okay. Any comments or questions on that? Seems pretty straightforward. Anything from you there, Jackie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Through you to Karen, excuse me, how much after this transfer will be left in the council reserve?
If I could, through you.
Go ahead.
The Council Reserve will be a balance of $82,965
Okay.
after this transfer.
Right. And this just, Jackie, just to be clear, this is a transfer into Council Reserve, not out of it.
Correct, into Council
Right.
Reserve.
That's what I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to know what the balance would be after the transfer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Oh, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that, to recommend that council approve the fire chief's requests for the $25,000 transfer as noted here.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, Councilor Marchetti?
Yes.
Ms. Shea?
Yes.
Councilor Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Clements?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 3. I guess Karen has asked us to switch around items 3 and 4. So we'll do item number 4 first. Review the town manager's 6-year capital plan, fiscal 22 to 27, and entertain a motion to submit to council as presented. So I guess I go through to you, Mr. McCall.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mike.
I do have a question about the switching of this.
Go ahead.
Just looking at the council, the charter, the town charter, under Section 4 proposed budget, the town manager would propose expenditures for current operations during the ensuing fiscal year, detailed by offices, departments, and agencies, and the method of financing such expenditures. And 2, proposed capital expenditures during the ensuing fiscal year, detailed by offices, departments, and agencies when practicable, and proposed method of financing each such capital expenditure.
Right.
Under Section 7, Capital Improvement Program, that would cover, and that would be covering the capital plan that we have, that you are moving to number 3 tonight.
Well,
So they are 2 separate items, and I never got a capital project budget from the town manager.
it's in your book.
But that's a separate, that's Section 7.
They're essentially all part of the same document.
Well, I'm just reading
'Cause
what
the
the charter
first year-
says.
I know,
There's separate items. There should be a separate capital project budget tonight.
Would you care to answer there, Karen?
They're all included within the same document,
That's
so
what
as
I
long
said.
as they address the different items in the charter that
Right.
they should, that we felt that would be sufficient.
Yeah, that's the way we've done it for years.
Well, if
Yeah.
I could continue, just because someone thinks that it should be done that way, that's not the way it says in the charter. That's all I'm pointing out. Thank you. And I think we should go by the charter. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
So I would ask, point of information.
Go ahead.
I've been here for 7.5 months. I sent this budget memo out. I've been sharing information with the council. You're going to tell me, Mr. Marchetti, you waited till the evening of the presentation of this to try and point out something that there's a problem?
To tell you the truth, I did not see that you had not proposed a budget until the last couple of days. I saw that there was no proposed budget. So yes, I thought
There
the
is a
same
proposed
thing,
budget.
that they were the one and the same, but they are not one and the same. And when I discovered that, that's when I brought it up. And I don't understand your questioning why I'm asking that question. If I want to ask a question, I'll ask a question.
Well, if I may respond, I've done what has been acceptable in the last several years.
Yep.
So if it was not acceptable prior to my arrival, I would have hoped that it would have been pointed out, for one.
Yep.
But I just wanted to make sure that people understand, if things aren't brought to my attention, because I haven't been here for much more than 7 months, I don't know. But my understanding in preparing this with Ms. Harnois is that for FY22, if you add up the columns, we are putting together a budget.
Absolutely.
And that the successive years of proposed budgeting make up that plan. So
Absolutely.
it was my understanding that the document as its totality is the budget and plan. But if somebody wanted me to separate it, I guess I just would have rather found out ahead of time. Maybe you just realized that today. I didn't catch that in the charter either. It's just, I want to make it clear that if there's something that I could do better, I would just prefer in the future that I get advance warning, and I'm more than happy to accommodate and try and separate it out so that we wouldn't have any issues.
Well, to be honest with you, Mr. McCall, I don't think most of the rest of us have issues. We've seen these budgets, these capital plans presented this way in general for years now. They've generally gotten better over time, and it's. I think the issue obviously is that the current year's capital budget is where we're seeing all of these funds coming from, specifically to do things that we want to do, that the idea is to do for this year. The capital plan doesn't necessarily have funding allotments because we don't know if they'll still be there next year or 2 years from now. Or they may get bounced to a year, or they may get kicked back 5 years, who knows? Things like that happen all the time. And it's been kind of standard operating procedure for our town to do stuff like this for years. Former Councilor Clements has seen them even longer than I have. And they've gotten better over the years, generally, for the most part. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to agree and disagree and be disagreeable in some point. My first comment would have been somewhat to what Mr. McCall had said. This is how it's been allowed to be done by the previous town manager for at least the last 3 years, definitely. I questioned it when we were harping on getting back in my day, we harped and harped about that section of the charter. And we were told originally, well, it's his first year, it's in his second year. And then finally, when he was beat up a little bit more, it became, he brought this forward. And I, as you, Councilor Marchetti, looked at it and thought, but where's the plan? It's a bunch of numbers with a bunch of empty years, and do you have any suggestions for funding anything? Which is very difficult to predict, of course, obviously. I understand that concept. But this is what was allowed to be done then, and clearly, I haven't been looking at this plan with the exception of the capital plan for Gen Gov, I haven't been paying attention to the big, broader plan because I knew it really hadn't changed much. This template has what's been used when Mr. Sanangelo was here and what was approved and allowed, much to the dismay of a few other councilors, a few. So I can understand your concerns with that section of the charter, because I, like you, read it a certain way. That being said, Mr. McCall this is what you've been doing, and this is what was acceptable, and so I stand up for that ability. And if you want a different plan, then you got to give somebody notice ahead of time so that they can do the work, because it's a lot of work to do the other way that I believe you're indicating. So I don't disagree with you on that, on what the charter says. I just agree with the fact that you need time to do that type of thing. If you're going to change midstream, then people need to be aware of that.
Right.
Because this is what council has allowed to perpetuate for the last few years, definitely. In that being said, it's as thorough as it can be, and it seems to cover what potentially we could fund if we had millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
So that's just my input, again, from past history. I will say that prior to Mr. Sanangelo, we had Mr. Pecos, and we had Bob Reed in there, and we had, who was the other one? Anyway, we had those two for temporaries, so there was this,
Jack Keeley was in there.
yeah, we even had, yeah. So I know there was some time when, like Mr. Pecos tried to work on a capital plan and had a bunch of spreadsheets. I think I have copies somewhere. And so he had done some work, but it wasn't thorough because it wasn't a permanent fix, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And prior to that, Mr. Clark had done, Town Manager Clark had done some work and had done some fairly good future forward thinking of where things could come from. But again, it still was never as full as what charter, I'll say that, and I like Mr. Clark's style, but it still was not as full as what charter seems to indicate. So we have to look at that as I think in charter review, I welcome you to come and let's bring that forward so we can talk about that section of the charter and what makes sense in today's world. I would love to have that. So please, I hope you attend when we get to that section, or before then, to all of them.
That's a good suggestion, Denise. Thank you.
So thank you for my time.
Okay. So,
if
go
I
ahead,
could-
Mr. McCall.
All right, go ahead.
Well, the one thing I was going to say when it was actually time to start talking about this is that in my previous community, we used capital planning committees, and I'm familiar with that particular process. And I would agree, I don't really like the format of this. And one thing I mentioned to Ms. Harnois and to several other people that, given how relatively quickly I had to get the budget going and a few of the other things we were working on, we used the format that was here.
Sure.
But I've mentioned, I think, as well to Chairman Jovan, that I would like to look at revamping what we do here.
Okay.
And I would rather see something along the lines of a capital advisory or a capital planning committee that may consist of at least one member of the council, maybe a citizen member, some members of staff that meets on a regular basis so that this can be built over a period of time and given a lot more attention that it deserves than just, like landing a plane at the last second. You do it right at the beginning of the calendar year so that you get it in time for here, but that way we get a longer look, different set of eyes, and I think that might address some of those issues, and we can talk about and I'm more than happy to talk with council members outside about how do we format that. But I just wanted to make sure, I didn't want to do anything wrong. I was using the template that was provided to me, so if I was making a mistake, I just wanted to make sure, so.
No, that sounds like a good idea. We probably should do that. I mean, I know some of the other towns I cover as a reporter have those kinds of committees, but it's one of those committees I don't think we've ever had. So it may be a good idea to look into doing something like that. I think your idea of trying to revamp things and try to tweak it a bit and bring some ideas from other communities in to do something like that is probably a good one. But obviously, we can't do it for this year because we've got this in front of us now, and that'll take us some extra work. So thank you for suggesting. Anyway, so how do you want to approach the capital plan that we now have? I'm sorry, are you pointing at Karen or him?
I thought Mr. Marchetti wanted to say
Did you have something else you want to say, Mike?
Oh, that's fine. I was just pointing out, we're not an ad hoc committee that just does things and honor whatever rule we want to do week to week, we make it up as we go along. We're supposed to follow the charter. That's all I want to point out. Thank you.
We understand that. Yeah, we're trying to. Okay. So I guess through you to, I guess for you to, if you could kind of give us a run through of your capital plan as you have it.
Well, we can, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For you this evening, you have the 6-year capital plan starting with FY22. As I said, I've worked with Ms. Harnois on this when I issued a budget memo last spring, early January. Shortly thereafter, I followed up with a letter regarding capital requests. Again, asked people to, be mindful of our situation, the pandemic, And we then asked people to essentially rank them, put them in their years of preference, and then we worked on these while we had people in to go over their regular budgets. We talked to them about capital issues, and then Ms. Harnois and I have gone back and forth. The budget as presented before you is $5.7 million. It is in line with the financial policies that the town has, and we can start by going line by line. Having not done this before, I just want to make sure we go in the right fashion. Ms. Harnois, you can give me the guidance as you want. With regard to the airport, there was a request for updated maintenance for the hangar, and that was something that we were looking to go forward with, and that was going to be resolved partly out of revolving accounts and some old capital monies, and that's in the amount of $45,000.
Okay. I'm just curious, and before you go on, I guess, Karen, this FY18 capital project account that's listed in here, why wasn't it spent back in 18?
I believe it was maybe due to the timing of it. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure. I did let the airport know that we were doing it this evening. I'm not sure if anybody's on. But the monies were carried forward. I know they did some minor repairs at the beginning, and there was some money left.
Was that originally planned for hangar maintenance? Originally?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Was that money originally set aside for hangar maintenance or
Yes.
something else? It was.
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
Okay. Anybody else have a question on that item? No?
Is this in the capital budget?
Huh?
Is this being put into the capital budget?
It's the very first item.
It is in the capital budget.
It's the very first item. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Martina.
I'm
Yeah,
talking
okay.
about, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Apologize.
Go ahead.
I guess that's basically my question. If we vote for this now, is that meaning we're putting it in the capital budget for this year?
That
Or
would be,
that's
we're starting
future?
for this year.
Okay, this is this
That
year's
would-
money.
This is the project starts with the first year.
Okay.
And then the rest of the capital plan goes forward from there.
All right, so,
It is a little confusing. And as I think Town Manager McCall mentioned a few minutes ago, it probably should be revamped and organized in a little bit better way, and over time, we can hopefully get that done. But this is what we have at the moment, so,
Gus, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
yeah, I get that, it seems. So anyway, so how do you feel about this particular item? Do we want this in the capital budget for this year or not? How do we?
this year, we had that big grant for the airport.
Yep.
Is this going to interfere with what they're doing, or is this over and above, or?
If I'm, Mr.
If you know.
I mean, I dabble in places and things and hear things, no. But don't quote me, right? I know that they are still working on finishing that maintenance hangar. So when they talk about improvements to the maintenance hangar, there's maintenance on hangars, but there's the maintenance hangar.
Right.
So they have been trying to get that maintenance hangar from bare bones deconstructed to back to solvable and rentable, and they have a tenant, my understanding, for it. They've talked about that before at other meetings. I wish somebody from the airport was here to say it, but these are the things that I've picked up at other meetings that we've gone to and in conversation with airport people that I know. And that I didn't know specifically that this line item was coming like this until I saw it here, because I thought they had enough, but clearly they mustn't have enough if they are asking for more.
Well,
The
this is
maintenance
in the
hangar
capital.
still, there was roofing issues, there was heating issues, there was, they did a full takeout and needing to put all new insulation and, getting it up to snuff. And that's where some of that money didn't get forward and done, didn't get used up. They'll use that, plus obviously times have changed, things cost more, I imagine. I know supplies are more. I could just guess at those things, but I do know that one of the things that's really important to them is to make sure that maintenance hangar is finally finished, contractors in, get it done so that they can rent it. Because they've had somebody, you've heard this before, I believe, from perhaps the president or the chairman. There is an airplane detailing company that wants to come in and have their business there. You might have heard that at a meeting we've had. So just bringing the same information that's out there on the, it's not anything privy, it's just what I've heard. So I would say that's why they're looking for that extra amount of money to add on to what they have.
Right, okay. Mr. McCall?
And just to Ms. Shea, the other grant is solely for the runway improvements, so that's nothing to do.
Right. And just to clarify, as I'm reading this actually doesn't come, we're not getting any money from from free cash for this particular item anyway. It's revolving funds from the airport and that old capital project money that's been set aside from years ago.
Oh, okay.
I'm correct
Now
on
I
that, right, Karen?
understand.
That's right, right?
Correct.
Okay, so there's no new free cash from this one, okay. Okay. So how do you guys want to do it? Do you want to do each individual item, or do you just want to take them as a whole?
May I suggest, if I may?
Go ahead.
Why not review this year?
Yeah.
Get to the bottom line, check off things. We've done that before where you make a note near something. If it's something you're not too happy with or you have a question about, well, you can ask, obviously, as we're going through. But, if there's something you definitely aren't against or for or you are for or whatever, make your notes, and then we'll go back and if there's questions, you take those items and, you can vote things separately
fair.
at the end. But at least let's get through 21, since, to Councilor Marchetti's point, it's a
Right.
6-year plan. We got a 6-year plan, let's go through it
Right.
and go back and finish the capital part of it.
Right.
That way, it'll take two separate situations in hand,
Right.
I
Okay.
would think,
Okay.
in some way, if
Mr.
that's
McCall?
okay with the rest.
That makes sense, yeah.
I think it'll be faster, actually. I
Probably
know,
will,
I can see
yeah.
maybe some people don't think it might be, but I think it'll be faster if we go through each item, get it over with, and then go back and just,
Right.
you
That
know,
makes sense.
Sounds logical.
That makes sense,
or
thank
not.
you. Okay. Mr. McCall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next department is the fire department, and we did make some changes to the recommendations. The second column in is the funds that we were recommending. We're recommending the portable radios. And at one time, we had the forestry truck in, but as you know, there was some discussion relative to the USDA Communities Facility Grant application. And as you know from the other evening, we were looking to take the forestry truck off of that and replace that with another dump truck. Because we were going forward with that, we have made the decision to take the forestry truck off of our recommendation and transfer the monies that we would have been spending from free cash on this particular item, and we're going to amend the DPW area under the larger dump truck.
Right.
I did have a meeting this morning with Chief Normandin, who is online here, and I did call him later after I met again with Karen. What he and I talked about earlier was moving the forestry truck out, or it was slated originally to be in a latter year, but we're now going to look at changing the forestry truck into, I want to say FY24, and then moving the ambulance up to 23, and I'm sure we can talk about it later in the plan. But part of the logic for that is, as many people may have seen on the news, due to COVID and shortages of parts, specifically semiconductors, there's a almost 2-year lag time on the manufacture of ambulance.
Really?
So the thought process would be move that up and order the replacement ambulance, because it's going to take at least 2 years for it to show up. So we can talk about that when we get to those latter fiscal years. The chief had reminded me that we are looking at a point in time where we need to replace the 1989 pumper truck, that for insurance reasons we have to have 2 pumpers and 1 reserve engine, and those are his frontline vehicles. I did call him back this afternoon after meeting with Ms. Harnois and said that after we looked at moving the monies around to keep the budget at $5.7 million and to move the monies around to pay for the dump truck, I did not know how I could advance the pumper replacement in this particular fiscal year's capital budget. I know he's on the line. I don't know if he wishes to comment, but at this point in time, the only thing that we're recommending, or I'm recommending in this budget right now, is for the radios. And we will have to find a spot for the pumper in a future fiscal year.
Do you have any particular idea at this point where that's likely to go? Do you have any particular idea where that's likely to go? at this point?
That is up for discussion, but I would imagine the chief would want it sooner than later because that particular engine is 30 some odd years old. What he's looking to do is push everything down and make his 2008 pumper his reserve. Again, he said, you know, if we don't have it or if one of these breaks down and it becomes problematic and it could cost us with regard to our insurance. And we left the conversation open to discussing future funding mechanisms to try and put money aside. I know he's asked me in the past if there's a way we could slowly build money on the side for these large purchases because you know, when we look at capital, there are certain things like police cars, they get a lot of wear and tear. People see that they put a lot of mileage. These fire apparatus, I'm no authority on fire engines, but I've been around municipal government long enough to know that they do have a certain lifespan. They do get so many hours on them. And then over time, some of the electronics and other things can become compromised. But there is a relative lifespan of these vehicles. But when they do come due, pumpers can cost $500,000. Ladder trucks can cost $1 million or more.
Oh, yeah.
And it can be a tough pill to swallow where on a routine basis, certain departments get smaller vehicles that cost less.
Right.
For a fleet of police cars, you do 1 or 2 every year and nobody thinks twice about it. But over 10 years, 10 police cruisers is the same as 1 fire engine. But when people see that price tag at that time, it becomes problematic. So I do agree with the chief that there should be a way to, you know, maybe budget for this incrementally. It's something that we can look at as we move forward, but we have not come up with a place for it yet because the conversation really took place this afternoon about how to try and adjust after the USDA. And Karen and I looked at it, and I told the chief at the end that I didn't have the money to put it in this year, and we were unable to have a long enough conversation prior to coming in here to pick where it would go in future years. But he's online. I saw his name. I'm sure he'll make a pitch as soon as possible.
Right. I know some communities have capital stabilization accounts specifically designed for things just like this, where they stockpile a couple $100,000 a year for long-term, big ticket items. So maybe we could think about doing something like that. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I noticed I looked through obviously and saw what Chief Normandin proposed in terms of leasing. I thought that was very, very lucrative for whatever, I don't know what even, very advantageous in a lot of ways. I mean, $50,000 a year is way better than, you know, these big hits. And it certainly is easier to piecemeal out of free cash, you know, $50,000 a year than it is to ask for $500,000 in one whack when you have other things that need doing.
That's true.
It's a shame we couldn't find $50,000 a year for the next 15 years.
Well, what's the catch though when you have a 15-year lease on, say, a fire truck or something?
He's got a hand up. I see it.
Hi, Paul. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mr. McCall and Mr. Chairman and everybody else on the committee here. Good pick, Denise. I was going to lead right into that. That definitely is a way a lot of towns are doing business now because of these large purchases. Obviously, you know, this fire truck is about $580,000. It's got a 5 to 7% increase as we keep moving forward, increase in costs. So as we move forward, this vehicle, our current vehicle is just going to get older, and finding parts will be much more difficult. This truck owes us nothing. We refurbed it about 8 or 10 years ago. We did some body work on it. It's a 1989. I think one of the other things that you have to remember is that we may get a little bit of money back on the trade-in on this one, or the surplus if we auction it off. Anywhere between, I'm just guessing, talking with a couple of other vendors, anywhere from $15,000 to maybe $20,000, $25,000 for the cost for the replacement of that, to get money back towards the new truck. I really like the government capital corporation program. The town of Auburn does a good majority of their radio communications, which, as you all know, is an ongoing upgrade scenario that we're going to have to keep continuing to do for years on end. But they also do vehicles. The breakdown, so this government capital breakdown that you have in your packets, it's a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and a 15-year plan. You know, I'm favoring the 10 or the 15-year plan. I'd be honest to say that, you know what, let's scratch my radios this year if we can find another $30,000. Somebody's making noises. If we were able to find another $30 in the free cash or the capital plan, I'd be happy to move forward with that. But this truck needs to be replaced. And as I said at the last council meeting, we've been bouncing back and forth with all of our vehicles over the last several years. I'm sure you can all agree with that. Moving them from one year to the next. This happened again this year with the USDA thing. So just room for thought on that. The only downside on this lease program is that, yeah, you do pay a little bit more interest. But after the loan or the term is completed, the town gets the vehicle itself. You don't have to take out another loan to keep the vehicle. It's $1 buyout at the end of the loan. So if we were to do this for 15 years, you know, you'd spend in this case, it says my data that I've had the girl work on was 600,000. It'd be about 51,000 for 15 years. You know, that's where it is. I'm dangerously saying at this point that you know, this fire truck's old. And we have old equipment. We talked about a 1971 Forest fire truck a few months back. You know, it's time, and I hope that we can work something out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So what do you guys think about that?
Mr. Chair?
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Any thoughts on that and on what Paul is just suggesting about throwing the pumper in here at least 51,000 plus or minus lease a year versus doing the? Are you saying that instead of doing the radios there, Paul, and kick the radios down for another year, or how desperately needed are those?
I
Of course,
need
the
the
issue is always
radios,
desperation.
but we need the pumper. You know, I don't want to give up the 20 grand. This is my second year trying to put together a radio replacement plan.
Right.
One radio right now costs me about $4,100 to replace.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move forward, it's either going to be a very large capital. If I keep not getting the 20,000, the plan is not going to work out. As you see in the remaining 6 years, there's always $20,000 in there to keep buying 4 or 5 radios each year. And by the time the 6th or 7th year is, all the radios are staggered out and they're not purchased all at the same time, like we received the grant in 2012 with. So right now, those radios are 9 years old, but there's a life expectancy in the fire and public safety service of 10 years. That's like the 10-year number for everything.
Right.
You know, we don't want to have a firefighter get trapped inside of a building and have a radio go out because it's 12 or 13 years old, which we will get to at some point. But my forethought and thinking process to make it less damaging for the town on the radio side is $20,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And again, I think Shane on the police department has the same thing. Although I do see that this year he does not have that in there, but last year he got 20 grand in the capital. I'm not saying because he got it, I should get it, but you know, again, if I have to make up the $20,000 and we can find $30,000 somewhere else to make this 15-year payment thing go through for those next 15 years, I'll be glad to give it up.
Question.
And I think our Councilor Ryan had a question for you, Gus.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see it. Sorry. Jackie?
Yeah, she's got no video still.
Because she doesn't have a
Yeah.
photo, so go ahead.
My video is still not working. I have
Yeah.
no idea why. I even tried logging in on my phone and still wouldn't connect. I have no idea what's going on. So I wanted to jump off that idea because I was thinking that, I mean, at the end of the free cash allotment, we end up with like roughly with 16 grand left over, right? So there's an additional 16 grand we could also be looking at putting in towards this pumper truck. If this pumper truck is necessary and the fire department's, you know, saying we already cut out one of their vehicles this year. This sounds like it's very important to get done. Let's find in here to find that 50 grand. And like, for example, later in the budget, we're going to be talking about some of the things the school department needs, right? Like a master study. Maybe that can be bumped off for 1 year, and we can take some of the money from that and put it towards the pumper truck, which is a more immediate need. So there's ways we can look through this budget and find money to make this pumper truck a reality on the lease program.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. That's,
So question.
all right, go ahead, Denise.
Thank you. Chief, the pumper truck has to be ordered, and it's a 2-year process to get it delivered, is my one question. And how does the payment side of that work? If you do a lease on it, our first payment's due a year after signing, but you have to do a down payment then a year after signing, or how would that work? You order it, you don't pay for it up front. So how would all this work if it was to be done?
So, Mr. Chairman, through you to Ms. Clemens, the first answer is I do know the ambulance would take 2 years for delivery. Excuse me. I just got that because obviously we worked on a little ambulance package with the USDA thing, so I was getting numbers and information on that. I can tell you that even though COVID is here and delays have been made, I do know a local town nearby to us, they ordered a vehicle similar to what we're looking to buy from a different vendor that we would like to use, and it took them about 9 months for that vehicle to come in.
Okay. So
On those other questions, Denise, I'd have to research that a little bit more before I answer those questions, to be honest with you. I do know that, do we start paying? That's a great question. Do we start paying as soon as we make the order? Or do we start paying when the vehicle comes in? That would make a big difference if on the capital years too. So can I get back to you on that? I'd really like to research that a little more. To be honest with you, this was really not even going to be the piece that was going to be discussed, because when, like Mr. McCall said, we would really talk putting the truck through. Things changed over the last couple of hours. This was the initial work that I had done back in January with the leasing options. And as we move forward, counselors and people on the board, this government capital can be done for anything within the town, the municipality. That's what they do. So I think it's great that I'm bringing it forward for the fire truck, but obviously communications, DPW vehicles as we move forward. I think this is something that we should really look at. I do know members in the past have said we don't really want to pay interest on it, but to make these large purchases work out, this is kind of the way we have to go. So sorry I couldn't answer that second question, Denise. I will get those answers very quickly.
Yeah, no, I would say it's to your betterment to get those answers as quickly as possible, and the details on how this whole situation works, clearly,
Yep.
on both sides, whether it's the government capital side or the actual purchasing side from the manufacturer of the truck. I think that those are the types of things that the council will definitely want if they're going to make a decision for you. So should we recommend that to be the option?
Right.
Well, if I could say, Gus, through the chair, if you guys approve the 51,000, I'll be glad to have those answers to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
We'll consider
I
that,
had to
right?
try it.
Okay, interesting.
I do have one question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Through you to the town manager, you're just waiting till tonight to tell us about this pumper truck?
No, it's in your...
That's right.
It's in the list.
And you know why? Because it wasn't on the list of anything I approved. He asked me this afternoon.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I will stick by my earlier recommendation that we had only recommended $20,000 to go forward. If we want to look at borrowing, then I think that's a bigger conversation. The only thing that is in this budget that is being dealt with by a long-term borrowing is the pavement management.
Right.
Everything else here is being paid out of free cash or grant monies. So I think that would be, based on my review of what you've done in the past, that would be stepping outside of the norm or maybe establishing a new precedent. I think it's a great topic for a different day, for a different conversation.
Definitely.
But it's, I heard other councils talking about now taking big chunks of other sections. We have a plan in front of you. This was not on the recommendations. I would respectfully request we work our way through and get to the end before we have any major conversations about moving things about.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chair?
go ahead, Jackie.
Thank you. I also do want to point out, it wouldn't be the first time we have done a lease on the capital plan through
Sure.
the use of free cash. I know we did that with the school district with the leasing of their Chromebooks.
Yep.
So this wouldn't be the first time we would get a lease on something. That precedent's already been set, because the first time it happened, I actually questioned it, that if this was the precedent we were going to set, and the council at the time decided this was the precedent they were going to set. So it has been set. So yes, I'm fine with waiting till the end to have some of these discussions, especially if when we get up to full council. But it's definitely, I think, something worth to consider, especially considering the age of the pumper truck and
Yep.
the fact that we did one of his other vehicle requests. I think it's only right to at least give it some consideration.
Mr. Chair, for point of information, I just want to point out that in our budget books, under the fire department, was a nice letter from the chief in regard to the pumper truck and the information on government capital and an example of the $600,000. So
Right.
that's why I brought it up, because we were talking about needs. And I saw that and said, why aren't we looking at $50,000 a year instead of $500,000 a year? So that's the only reason I brought it up. See if it, so.
That's what I think we're here to do, is to throw around these ideas and see how we can solve these problems if we can.
Thank you.
Anyway, but I think Mr. McCall is correct that we do have the plan here in front of us. So let's try to work our way through it, because I don't want to be here till midnight. So, Mr. McCall, you have the floor.
We have, following the fire, we have police, and we have recommended the 2 replacement cruisers. They're listed here for $120,000, as well as replacement of the aging out bulletproof vests, and they will be budgeted, or we're planning on funding those through free cash, as well as a portion of the vehicles through that USDA grant from
Right.
the other day.
So just to clarify, the actual amount for free cash is $82,518, according to this. That's still correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So could I have a point of clarification
Go ahead.
through you, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
You consider free cash the capital budget?
Yeah.
Is that, okay.
Yeah, that's how we
Because
do
free
it.
cash is separate in the charter from capital budget. So, I know you don't like that, but that it is. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. McCall? Unless Shane has anything he wants to say about these items? Because I see he's up there somewhere.
Unless you have questions, Mr. Chair, I'm all set.
Okay. Does anybody have questions on these items? I mean, obviously, we've already voted to do the cruisers by way of the USDA grant, so this is the other section of that particular project. This is our share of it, essentially.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
What number then, instead of the 120,000?
The 82,518 under the free cash line.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's the amount that's coming from our side.
Yep.
And the USDA grant is the 37 change. Okay. So, no comments or questions on this particular issue? Okay. Mr. McCall? Thank you, Shane.
So the next item, Mr. Chairman, is the monies for the animal kennel for Southbridge Police. We are asking for $20,000 in additional money. We are asking those to remain in place at the moment, and those will be funded out of free cash.
Where does that stand as far as Bay Path doing the work and that kind of stuff? I know that got kind of put on hold, so.
So this afternoon, I had a conversation with Chief Woodson, and there was a question as to whether Bay Path would be able to work on this spring, because they were supposed to start demolition through April. I will not exaggerate when I will say about less than a half hour before we came in here, I got a response from Bay Path saying that due to COVID, their timeline had been pushed back on a house project they had with their students, so that they will not be likely to start this by the end of this fiscal year, so that first chance they can tackle it is in the fall. So, came out the last minute.
Do you have any particular?
And I apologize, I know Mr. Marqueta probably asked me, did I just learn? I did, because of a conversation with the chief when we were talking about a related matter, I asked him about the dog kennel,
Yep.
and he had said the last day of April is tomorrow, and I haven't seen Bay Path yet. So I sent an email to Mr. Brenner and Mr. Iacobacci, and they got back to me. They had the person who's overseeing the student projects, and they wrote back and just said they apologized, but they let us know today that they won't be coming.
Right.
So.
So do either you or Shane have any particular feelings as far as what do you figure the probability of getting this project done next year actually is?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we did talk with the chief. We have some thoughts if Bay Path can't commit to it by the fall, but I have an agreement from Ms. Rixon that she would like to sit down with us and discuss the plan of how we will get this taken care of in the fall. And based on the outcome of that conversation, the chief has some alternatives that he thought we could look at as how to get this funded and done. So I would just respectfully ask for your patience so that we can meet with Bay Path to see if they have the capacity to get this done in the fall. If not, then we will probably come back with a revised plan on how to get this done. And if I misspoke, Chief Woodson, you can jump in, but I think that was the gist of our conversation after hearing from Bay Path.
Okay. Okay. So this is kind of a placeholder at the moment then? Essentially? So this is kind of a placeholder at the moment then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. How
Can I
much do we already have allocated to this project? Karen?
If I can, there were two appropriations into this, 130,000 and 100, so there was a total of 230, and the balance is 218,000.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Did you have a question there, Mike?
You asked the question, thank you.
Oh, okay. Any other questions or comments on this item? Jackie, anything from you?
No, nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. McCall.
So we did not recommend anything within economic development at the moment, Mr. Chair. However, moving into information technology, we did recommend the purchase of a diesel generator, well, a generator, I should say, for backup power supply here. As you may know, we've been working on a continuity of operations plan for the town, various departments. One of the few places that we do not have a backup source of power is here. Mr. Conoyer is here this evening. I know he is recommended that. We are putting it in here. Just also let you know that I have asked our legislators. They had reached out to me about a month or so ago about potential capital projects within the town. I did list this as a potential. I have not heard back from them yet as to the likelihood of them being able to fund that. So I would recommend that we go through here. If at a later date we do receive some additional funding through them, or we're able to get something through ARPA funds if they come through for COVID relief and preparedness and infrastructure, then we could revisit these monies. But for now, the plan would be to fund that generator through the capital plan.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, and maybe this is a question for Will, isn't the turnaround time for generators fairly long? Or am I thinking of something else? I was just asking, isn't the turnaround time for generators fairly long? Or am I thinking of something else?
I don't know. I haven't bought a big industrial generator in a long, long time, like forever. But I would say that's probable, but like any other industrial equipment, I'm sure Heather could answer that.
Okay.
There is a lot of work that would have to be done, though. You just don't buy a generator.
Sure.
There's design work that would have to be done. The electrical loads here would have to be measured and balanced. They'd have to prioritize the circuits that you need available in cases like this. So there's a lot of work that's involved.
So would this 135 grand that you're listing here just be for the generator itself, or would that include the various electrical work and that kind of stuff that you were just mentioning?
That's Heather and my best estimate as a place to start, yes.
So I have looked into some generators that would be probably big enough for this building because I was looking at them for the water and wastewater side, a portable generator. So the size of the generator that we'll need here is not anywhere compared to the size that we had at the wastewater treatment plant, which did take a lot longer.
Okay.
So it will take a couple months once we figure out a size, but you have to go through a whole bid process. This isn't
Right.
like something
sure.
we're just going to purchase
Sure.
off the street.
Sure.
We're going to have a design and a bid process, and there'll be electrical, so there'll be engineering, there'll be electrical work that has to be done in the building with transfer switches and things of that nature, and then the generator in addition, so.
How would that tie into, I know that we had done some of those kinds of electrical work with the transfer over to natural gas and some of the other stuff that we've done in recent years.
We
How
didn't do
would that
any
affect?
electrical work with the transfer over to
We
natural
didn't.
gas. It's totally separate.
Okay, but
Gas is only for the oil system.
Okay.
Now, with this generator that we'll be looking at, we probably will be looking at a natural gas generator.
Okay, where would it be likely to go?
That's
would
up
we
to
put
the
it?
design engineers to figure out. I'm not going to speculate on that right now. It'll probably go on that side of the building.
Yeah.
Because that's close to the gas and it'll come in with the feeders, but that's part of the design process. Layout and everything, that's why you're going to hire somebody, so.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Mr. McCall?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were requests in the library, recreation, and community center. At this time, we did not recommend going forward those. The next department that we did make recommendations for is the DPW. And as you know from the discussions with the USDA, the number one priority was the replacement of the F-450. There's a slight amendment. The number is no longer 90,000. It's going to be 84,505. We got that number today. And the free cash amount is $54,928. And I believe, and Karen could correct me if I'm wrong, but the number for the USDA remains the same.
Okay.
We are adding in, because of the change up on the USDA grant application, priority number 3, which is the LA 9000 replacement. And that would come out of free cash. We would be asking for $120,250, and the amount coming out of the USDA grant would be $64,750.
So does that mean that you're not doing the priority number 2 here, which you marked as the plow 350?
No, that is still going to be funded out of the snow and ice.
Okay. That's from the money that we didn't spend last year, right?
That would
Essentially?
be money that we didn't spend this year.
This year.
Currently, we still have budget in our $400,000 for snow and ice count. It wasn't an exceptionally bad year.
Yeah.
And we actually did quite well balancing it. I mean, we still had a number of storms. We have a full salt shed, so we still have excess money. And all the bills aren't quite in yet. There's still some repair bills that are coming in, so I don't want to give you a number, but I know Karen might have a better, $100,000 at least.
That's approximately 93,000 balance right now.
Okay. Mike?
Thank you. Through you to the town manager. So with adding this Ford spreader, that would go over free cash amount, correct? No? Well, without that, you said we only had $16,000 left.
Right, so we were doing this math this afternoon because we had the money coming out of the forestry truck, which is the 90,000. There's approximately $5,495 coming back, and I think the difference equals roughly the 16,000 that's left in free cash. Is that? It should come out that we're right about even. We were having to change this because of the changes that came out through the USDA.
Actually, if I could, we would have to reduce when we get to the free cash distribution, we would have to reduce the amount going to the stabilization by 25,000 to make all of this work.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on this item? Jackie, you have anything?
I have some comments, but I'll wait till the end.
What was that again?
I have some comments, but I'll wait till the end.
Okay. Okay. Mr. McCall.
Just a little bit of background information. That was actually the conversation right there that made me ask the police chief about the status about the kennel for the $20,000 to close the gap. And that's when he informed me that the demolition hadn't started, which started the phone call with Bay Path. That's how these things evolve. So when we were trying to see if we would be able to move the 20,000 to this so as not to adjust the stabilization amount.
Okay.
So that's how that conversation ensued. Going down the line, we get down to streets, sidewalks, and drainage. I know we have DPW Director Blakely here. We have several projects relative to bridge replacement, as well as the pavement management project. We are recommending going forward on the Ashland Ave Bridge replacement, the Elm Street Bridge replacement, and the Mill Street Bridge replacement, the right-of-way costs. And those monies will be coming in large part out of the small bridge monies, as well as Chapter 90 monies. And as you know from our prior discussions, the pavement management plan, the initial phase for the coatings and such is the $1.5 million that we are going to be going out for.
Right.
We just met with the rating, S&P ratings company yesterday to go over our financials so that they can allow us to progress with that borrowing.
Okay.
And there are no other,
Yes, there's one.
did I miss something?
The next page is one of mine.
Okay, definitely then, I think we do need just a little clarification, at least for people who are watching, is that you've got, you say you're taking a bunch of this money from Chapter 90, 920 grand, 715 grand, 200 grand. We don't get anywhere near that much in Chapter 90. How much of this has been stockpiled over the last several years?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
most of that has been stockpiled over the last couple of years. These projects have been ongoing.
Right.
Ashland Ave Bridge started 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Elm Street Bridge we were awarded last year. Mill Street Bridge, we just found out that that the state is going to take over the reconstruction of that, but we do have to cover the right-of-way costs. When we were reviewing the past capital plans, there was no place where it was kind of really listed that we were doing these as capital, but they really are a capital item.
Sure.
And so in talking to Karen, she said, why don't you put them on there just so we can show that these are some of the projects that we have ongoing. So, like I said, Ashland Ave Bridge is at like 75% design. They're just, will be coming actually to council about a couple issues we're having with the design, that some things that have changed. But they're getting to the point where they're going to get their approval from DOT, which allows it to go out to bid for construction. So that's a small bridge program that we did years ago with Ashland Ave.
Right.
Elm Street Bridge design is just starting, but we have probable costs. That's what we put in here. And we know that the Mill Street Bridge is coming. We don't have a engineer's estimate yet for the right-of-way, but we want to put a placeover holder in there so that everybody knows it's coming up. So we budget, when we know things are coming up that we
Right.
want to commit to doing, we have put budget numbers in there.
Okay, so how would these budgets, first off, a couple of questions. One is, what's the likelihood of any of these actually getting done in this coming fiscal year?
Ashland Ave Bridge should be in construction. I don't know that it will be completed because
Okay.
it's probably going to be a multi-year project.
Okay.
Elm Street Bridge will probably still be in design. And the right-of-way work will be, that's an ongoing thing.
Sure.
That's going to take 5 years because it's a state project.
Oh, sure, absolutely, I get that. DOT does everything slowly.
No. It's the accelerated bridge program that seems to be,
Yeah, the problem is they don't have an accelerator. So. Okay, and so how So how would the money that is that's allocated to these projects from Chapter 90 affect the other projects that we are taking money for Chapter 90?
Well, it doesn't affect it because
doesn't.
Chapter 90 acts kind of like, I don't know it acts kind of like a stabilization account or something like, so we put in requests and
Right.
say, this is allocated. So they kind of bank the money for us and they say this, we keep it and it's allocated. And when we're done with the project, if there's still funds that we haven't used, we close it out and it comes back to being available.
Okay.
So that's all it is. We kind of put the numbers in there as placeholders so that we don't get to the point where we're done with the design of the project and we don't have any money to actually do the work.
Right.
Okay,
That would be
so
done, yeah.
it takes, we're always thinking 5 years ahead of what we're trying to do. So a lot of times people will say, well, how much money do you have in Chapter 90? And I hesitate because, yes, we have funds there, but we can't just use those funds because of the fact that we know they're already designated
Right.
to this and to
Right.
that and to this. And so sometimes we'll provide you with charts of this is how much we have and this is how much is designated.
Okay.
But most of our funds at this point are designated between Main Street going on, South Street coming up, Ashton Ave
Street.
Bridge,
Yep.
Truthfully, we're sometimes, Ashton I would have expected to already be started.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like hedging sometimes, okay, we can do this project because Ashton hasn't started, but
Right.
we're
Okay.
we're always having to watch where that number is.
Sure, totally. That makes sense. Anybody else have comments or questions? Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. The Ashland Avenue Bridge is going to be, is $1.4 million. It's such a small bridge.
Yeah.
That's
It's
1.4.
a really expensive project.
I go past that bridge at least once a week. It's tiny, and it doesn't look like there's anything being done on it. So you're saying they're going to do something on it this year, or?
Well, before we can do anything, it has to be approved by Mass DOT.
Okay.
So that's what I was talking about, it being in the 75% design.
Yep.
Well, we have more, and I don't want to get into details, but
Yeah.
there's some requirements that Mass DOT have put in since we started this project that weren't accounted for. So it is a small bridge now. You are completely correct. The bridge as it exists does not meet the design requirements. That's why it's so expensive to replace it. It's going to be a completely new bridge, much wider, much longer of a span, meaning that's how far across you're going.
Okay.
So there's a lot, that's why it's so expensive.
All right, thank you.
Oh, do we have dates for the are they going to do a 75% design hearing somewhere in town at some point in the future?
I don't know that we have to do design hearings
We
on
don't?
bridges. It's not the same as like a tip project. It could be, and we just haven't got to that part yet because we don't got our approvals from Mass DOT.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Mr. McCall?
As far as the other items that were on here at this point in time, we have not added anything for the town hall.
The one item that I have here in the
There's
list
one
is the
item.
boiler
Oh, I didn't see
system.
it.
Yeah, I
right
think
here.
there's one thing for
Oh,
the
sorry
design
about-
replacement.
Sorry about it. Didn't want to forget it. We had for the design and replacement of the DPW boiler system, and that amount was for $100,000, and we were recommending approval, and we would be seeking the $100,000 from free cash.
I think, go ahead.
That's design and replacement? Or the
Nope, so-
design of the replacement?
No, it's design and hopefully and replacement, yes.
Okay.
Just want to be very clear.
Yeah, no kidding, because sometimes
I
those
mean,
designs.
Design is always 200,000, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
No, it's not going to be 200,000. It's a very discrete design. I don't know if anybody really, the existing boiler system is a 4-unit boiler system. One of the units is completely broken. We've attempted to try to find replacement parts for it. They don't make it anymore. They don't service it anymore. Basically, the day that we put it in, they didn't make them anymore.
I figures.
Of course. So it would have been really easy if they still made it because you would just replace that one compartment and the other 3 compartments are fine. The problem being is now we know we have a system that we can't find parts for and we already have 1/4 of it not operational.
Right.
If I lose another one of that boiler compartments, we won't be able to heat the parts of the building when it's really cold. We will
Yeah.
have problems meeting our heating requirements. So, yes, we're just making it go as long as we can, but it is one of those things that we know we have a very critical piece that could cause major damage in the future if we don't
Right.
fix it.
And that building, of course, is just a giant cavern, so it sucks heat. Yeah, okay. Okay, Mr. McCall?
So from there, we did not make any recommendations at the town hall at this time. We would have to go down to the school department, at which point there were several items that we did indicate that we wanted to go forward with approval. Those would be the emergency roof repairs at some of the elementary schools, the master plan study, the interior repairs, I believe that's all schools, as well as the HVAC plumbing valve replacements and the electronic visual aid displays. Those are some of the monitors, projectors, and then there was a lease that they were looking to pursue to replace some vehicles, or at least a vehicle.
Right, because I know they've been doing that for the last couple of years. I was curious about some of these items, the window replacements, the emergency roofing repairs, and the interior repairs. Is it possible that all of those could be bundled into like a small MSBA project? I know you cite MSBA eligible for the first one. I know there's a couple of weird projects that are available out there. There's some funding sources from MSBA that aren't gigantic project things. Seth, I don't know if you can answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. It's good evening. Happy to be here. It's a very good question about what is MSBA eligible. There are two MSBA programs. One is for sort of major building renovations and new school renovations that many people are aware of. The other one are sort of emergency small repair items, though to qualify for such things, there has to be both size as well as years involved. So in the situation for roofing, for example, as you noted, these would be to replace a roof, to replace a boiler, or to replace all of the windows with certain, have to be longer than certain years. The capital items you have in front of you for the school department wouldn't qualify because they're too small, both in terms of cost and not old enough.
Of course, that's too small by the MSBA standards, not necessarily ours. So,
Mr. Chairman, we did have a conversation, Dr. Villar and I, about looking at the MSB for some of the bigger projects because there's been some emergency repairs. I think I let the council know about, I'll say 6 weeks ago, we had a piece of one of the school roofs come off and we had to do some emergency repairs and that was covered by insurance. But as it was explained to me by Dr. Villar, all of the, I want to say the elementary school roofs are approaching 30 years old and they're all coming due at the same time. And so we had a preliminary discussion about looking at an MSBA project for or funding for some of these larger capital projects. So, it's on the radar. There are things that have to be addressed in a larger scope and scale. So, we can revisit those. But it is in the back of our minds utilizing that particular program.
Right. Yeah, I remember from what he was talking about at the EHS meeting and at the school committee hearing when he was presenting the budget. He mentioned both of those issues. And I was just kind of curious about trying to figure out how to try to remember about what he was saying. I just blew it out of my head. I hate it when that happens. That'll come back to me. Anyway, anybody else have comments or questions on this? Do you specifically have any issues about it since, your school committee and here?
Since I know as much about the school department and what needs they have as you do, I shall refrain from making any comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Denise?
Actually, go with Council.
Okay.
She probably can say this.
Okay, who is that?
Councilor Ryan.
Jackie?
Okay, Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Racine or the manager, whoever can answer this question. I see that this one has a priority listing, with 1, I'm guessing, being the most important and 5 being the least important, correct?
Generally speaking,
Correct.
1 is the
Okay.
So 1 is the my highest priority, right? That's what I'm getting. So I'm looking at this and, okay, I guess I'll save the rest of my comments for after. I just wanted a clarification on that. Thank you.
I do think it's a follow-up on that, actually. I do think it's interesting that the schools put the emergency roofing repairs as a second priority. Could you explain that a little, Seth? I mean, how much of an emergency is it if it isn't first priority?
Well, so the reason why the lease purchase was the first priority is that we already legally committed to
Yeah.
it. This is the third
Yeah, I
year
knew that.
of a 3-year.
Yeah.
So that's why it was first.
So how serious are the roof issues? Seth?
I would say, thank you, Counselor, I would say that it's a pretty serious issue. I mean, as the town manager just noted, we had a major problem just a few weeks ago.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's not at just one school, but all 3 of our elementary schools. Were all renovated back in 1992 or so.
Right. Denise, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up where perhaps Councilor Jackie might have said. I was taken aback by the cost of a master plan study for the elementary schools. Now, maybe I'm, lost track of time here, but one thing, it's listed as priority 5. Not that our schools aren't important, but they are, obviously, and a master plan certainly helps you to go forward. But $200,000, do we have quotes? These are going rates. And on top of that, I would be curious, when you start something like that, in my experience of other things, when we've had consultants and done things, generally there's a certain percentage down, and then you pay when a certain percentages of things are done. I can't imagine this $200,000 master plan would be done in a year. Is this, they really need $200,000 up front this year for a priority 5 master plan?
That does seem really high for a master
When
plan, too.
we have many needs.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I was going to wait till after, but I'm going to continue off Citizen Member Clements' point, because that's kind of where I was getting at, was, this is what I would view as a nice to have. Like, I want this done. I'm not saying that scrap it entirely, but
Right.
as was pointed out, we have a pumper truck that really should be replaced, and I'd rather take that money right now and put it towards that and other needs, the DPW's needs, for example, and then try to save whatever we can in stabilization if there's not other high needs, if that's the number 5 and it's going to cost that much. I feel like this is something that can wait 1 more year while we focus on the more immediate needs of the other departments. That's just my perspective, Mr. Chair.
And I might add one more thing to that, one more thing to consider, Mr. Racine. If the state is still managing us, then perhaps the state should be making sure we have a master plan going forward
That
and
would make
explain it
sense.
to us.
Yep. That would make sense.
100%.
Totally. Okay.
If I may,
Go ahead, Seth.
Counselor. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a very good one about why to include a master plan. The goal of this master plan is for Southbridge to take advantage of the incredible opportunity to receive funding through the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Due to the demographics of Southbridge, due to the MSBA program, the town of Southbridge would gain substantial amounts of revenue to support major renovations or a new school building, and or offset substantial costs if roofs were to be replaced or boilers were to be replaced. It really is an incredible opportunity, and every time you don't apply for something like this, we're potentially leaving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on the table. The purpose, there are a number of requirements because of how much the MSBA puts forward to communities. They have a number of requirements for this process, and it's not a really quick process. But they require a number of things, including they ask for, even for the small repair program that I mentioned, as well as for the larger scale program for major or new schools, they ask, have you completed a master plan? And they would like a copy of it. They ask for commitments for how long you will be in buildings. They want to see enrollment projections. They don't want to necessarily pay for 80% of a project if this is not going to be a critical building for the community for the next 10 years.
Sure.
So the reason why we included it is that it is not just necessarily a quick facility study of our 3 elementary schools, but you would hire an architectural firm to both assess the facility, to hire a demographer to do a detailed enrollment projection of what is happening at the elementary grades. As we noted just a couple nights ago, the enrollment for the district has been slightly declining. So we want to see what is the capacity that we potentially will need over the next 10 years. And how do our current buildings fit in there and not? And one of also the benefits of having an architectural firm come in and do this is that they would host a number of community meetings to come to a consensus about this. This is an estimate that we've put down. We would go out, seek quotes for this. These projects can be done within a year, but they're very detailed, time-intensive, community collaboration process. And the point here is to create buildings that our community deserves and take advantage of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars available through the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Okay, thank you. I got to admit, I don't recall ever having to do a master plan back when we built the high school.
Right.
And I got to admit, covering several other towns, I don't recall them, when they sought MSBA money, I don't recall them ever even mentioning having a school master plan. They may have one, but I've never heard of one. So maybe it's a good idea to have one.
Right.
But
If I could follow up.
Good.
Thanks. No, I think a master plan can make sure that everyone is understanding and going in the right direction, and clearly it would indicate needs or wants at times. But I guess I have a little bit of an issue, once again, with the unknown. That being, I realize it was number 5. Perhaps you never thought it might make it to the table, but clearly this, as the town manager earlier indicated, this information has been out for weeks now. If you knew weeks ago that it was on the table, you're not doing a good selling job at saying you need to go out for estimates for a master plan for a company to do it. You should have come prepared with how much those types of things will cost. You say you need to get, this is just your estimation, but you don't have actual, you're not sure. I still find it a lot of money with too many questions. It's similar to what we said to the fire chief. Come back with the details if you expect the council to approve something. So I'm just saying, I'm still very leery at $200,000 towards this. There's got to be a different number involved, perhaps, or a more finite number involved before I would recommend it to council.
I mean, I don't remember our town master plan costing anywhere close to that. I want to say it was, 70 or 80?
Right, but
Somewhere around there?
keep in mind,
be
that's a
right.
little bit different. I respect Mr. Racine's comments on needing to have an architect-type person to evaluate the school
Sure.
buildings
Oh,
as
totally.
themselves.
I
That's
get
a
that,
whole
yeah.
different ballgame.
Oh,
And as we
absolutely.
know, as we said, these types of people, engineers and all, cost a lot of money.
Sure.
So I get that.
Yeah.
But there's just not enough information for me to think that that's the best use of current funds.
Okay. Does anybody else have comments? Mike,
I think
did you?
Martina was before me.
The last meeting we had, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, through to Seth, the last meeting you had with the budget, you were talking about taking schools offline, and now you're talking about building schools. Am I having a senior moment here?
Thank you. May I just ask a clarification of what you mean by taking schools offline?
Pardon me, I
Consolidation.
didn't hear you.
I just was trying to understand if the terminology taking schools offline doesn't mean, I think I just heard consolidation. Is that what you were saying?
I still didn't.
I mean, as I recall, I think it came up either during EHS or during the hearing in front of the school committee. Though I think that might have been part of the discussion regarding part of the master plan to determine whether or not that would be something necessary. I don't remember the exact details of how it came up offhand, so I might be misremembering it too. But I think what she's trying to say, Seth, is that as I recall, I don't know if you mentioned it or Dr. Villar mentioned it, about the idea of looking forward and with the changes in our demographics and the changes in our student enrollment, there might be some concerns about changing the way we use the schools, which obviously would be logically part of the master plan process. So I think it didn't seem like when whoever brought it up, it didn't seem like it was very concrete at this point, for obvious reasons, I think.
Correct. I think we were more saying there could be a variety of different options. You could
Right.
Renovate the current all 3 elementary school buildings. It may be determined you only need 2. It may be determined that you want to build 1, and what location would that be best for the community? How would that look? How big would it be? There's a number of conversations that usually come into master plan conversations, and being aided by an architectural firm, they also usually bring in community partners to have these sort of deep conversations. And I think we were more referring to the other night that there could be multiple different options.
Okay. Mike, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I have a couple questions. First of all, the master plan is not the same as the facility study that is online. Through you to the town manager, I guess. We did a facility study. It's
couple of
on
years
the
ago,
town's
yeah.
website on
Sure.
your page, and the master plan is not the same thing.
If you're asking my opinion on what is, oftentimes one's a target study just to make repairs. Typically, a master plan is a long-range view as to the needs and the status of particular, like if you do a master plan for your downtown community, you're looking at all your infrastructure plans over a long range. Oftentimes, if you're doing just a facility study, in my experience, it's targeted to make certain fixes in a short term. That's how I would differentiate. One's short term, how do we get things up to a certain status? The other one is that, and as well as the long-term vision, what do we want to do, where are we going, and if we go in this route, what do we, the cost here and there. So they're different, one's short-term, one's long-term, in my opinion, and in my experience.
That would make sense. I would think that the facilities plan would feed into the master plan, obviously, but how they would use it, I'm not sure. Maybe you can answer that, Seth.
I was going to say we should ask the school how they view
Yeah,
it.
that's what I was going to do.
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. It's a very good question. There was, I believe there was a town-only plan a number of years ago. And then in 2019, there was a school-only facility evaluation. During that process, a person went through and basically just sort of fact-gathering process. identifying the age of the building, identifying the certain conditions, and laid out the potential cost for each one. We used that facility evaluation plan to help build our proposed 7-year capital plan here, but it didn't go into things of what types of schools do we want, what type of educational approach do we want to have, what is the projected enrollment going to be, what is the best location for new elementary schools for the community. There was no sort of community meetings and process to do that. That very quick study, which lasted, I believe, only about a month, cost, I believe, approximately $30,000 or $35,000. A master plan process is much more substantial and really involving a community process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And my second question is, through you to the town manager, would interior repairs, painting, handrails, door repairs, wouldn't that be considered a general operation budget type of thing and not a capital plan?
Typically, again, in my experience, capital items are something that you're looking, it's a dollar amount and a life expectancy amount, and it's related to a capital item or physical item as opposed to a recurring expense. So your vehicles cost over a certain dollar amount, you want to get so many years out of that. That's how you define a capital expenditure. I don't know that we have, I looked earlier in our financial policies, I don't know that we clearly define what is a capital expenditure. Some towns define that in their policies, but typically you want to be getting at least 5 years. Some of them cost $20,000. I think that for this particular question, I guess you'd have to ask the school. Some might characterize it as routine maintenance, but it could be a situation where it's accumulated, and he's in this particular one, it's all schools at once, so I can't articulate why they've chosen to put it this way, but it appears that they're doing an aggregate amount, and I know Dr. Villar said one of the schools is the new high school, middle school, even though it's 10 years old, it's had wear and tear of kids banging into it.
Sure.
It isn't all cinder blocks, it's drywall, and he said there needs to be repairs, and if they aren't done, you know, it could get into further disrepair, but they had put it all together. So I guess you could ask Mr. Racine a little bit more, but again, in my experience, the definition is you want to have a set number of years, a cost, and it needs to be something that's a tangible asset. You know.
Anything you'd like to say about that there, Seth?
Thank you. It was a very good question. One of the things that we've been talking about over the years that I've been supporting Southbridge public schools is what is the best way to maintain, renovate, support facilities. The Massachusetts General Law with Chapter 70 and the renovations that happened back in the 1993 Reform Law is pretty clear about with the school department to be in charge of sort of what happens within the building. But then there's a question about, but how do you create the right school building for others? We have, within our operating budget, we have money set aside for custodial supplies. We have a number of tradespeople hired to do repairs, but then there are some pretty substantial costs that come up during the year. How those costs have been paid for to date since my time over the last 3 years has been through this capital process and requesting these pretty more one-off type repairs that are not built into the operating budget.
I was curious also about the fact that I remember when we built the middle high school, one part of the requirement for MSBA funding was to have regular maintenance. I don't know if it's specifically for funding or maintenance plan or exactly how they required it at the time, because that was years ago. But how does this tie into that? And also I noticed that, and I probably should have caught this earlier, but I happen to notice thumbing over to your budget section in our budget book, that the maintenance line under facilities maintenance was $117,000 in fiscal 2020, and it's now $43,000. That's a big cut. And basically it seems like the sum that's being taken from maintenance is being foisted over on the capital program. I'm just curious about how that works, and what makes something, in your eyes, what makes something a capital project versus what makes it a traditional, wear and tear maintenance, just doing it on a day-to-day basis kind of a project?
Speechless.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. May I speak? I was just pulling up the, sir.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Am I okay to speak now? Oh,
Any ideas on that there, Seth?
yeah. Can you hear me, Councilor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I was just pulling up the relevant operating budget. So the operating facilities maintenance line as a broader category for FY20 actuals, we spent $208,373.
Yep.
For this year,
It's 219.
FY21, we increased that to $214,725, an increase of approximately $6,500. Next year, we are proposing to increase that line to 2019, $219,000, $20.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
About $4,000.
I did see that. That's why I was asking specifically about the maintenance element.
So the maintenance difference from FY 20 to 21, I believe, is just classifying expenses differently and trying to break that in greater detail. So if you notice, the biggest change from FY 20 to 21 is going from maintenance to maintenance supplies. So I think we were just classifying some expenses a little more appropriately, providing a little bit more detail, instead of going from a more general maintenance line to maintenance and supplies. But we do not plan on and have not cut any maintenance accounts in the last few years, and nor is there any intention to do it for next year.
Okay. And the second part of the question, how do you define what needs to be a capital maintenance project versus a maintenance project that you would kind of do in-house?
So I think how I would categorize that is that we maintain, as I mentioned, and continue to grow, general maintenance budget. The items identified that for the buildings that need to be improved through the town's facility evaluation from 2 years ago included a number of other costs. I said that that's what guided our 7-year plan, and those are the line items that you see in front of you. They were identified in the plan themselves. And I should also add, we have tried to move some costs actually off of the capital plan that's been used in the past into the operating budget.
Okay.
So for example, as councilors may recall, Chromebook leases were included in previous capital budgets, and they are now embedded into the operating budget.
Right. Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions on these items?
Can we just clarify the lease?
Mr. Chairman,
Huh? Oh, hi, Dave. How you doing?
All right, how are you?
Just for clarification, for the, well, hold on for a second.
Question.
Hold on a second. But just for the clarification, since your label is caller one, I know who you are, but could you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Okay, I don't know what caller ID I might be on your screen.
Yeah, you're
I'm on my
caller
phone,
one.
so I don't know. For the record, my name is Dave Smith, 145 Ridge Road.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Now, for the comment that goes to part of the conversation that you guys are talking about right now is the definition of a capital item. Now, General Government Subcommittee goes through the same problem and question every year for probably the last 5 years. It is an item that has an expected lifespan of at least 5 years and has a minimum cost of $10,000. So that gives you some direction where it's going. Does it go under a capital expenditure or a general fund repair out of your budget? So going to the definition first helps define that and where it's going. And then you make your judgment from there. Now my question is, I came on late listening to the meeting, and it was not my intent to speak. I was just curious to what was going on. Now, it appears as though most of our capital expenses are going towards equipment purchases. Now, listen to the conversation over the last year or so. We know we have 2 different facility studies, one done on the general side of government and one from the school side. And even whether someone might agree or not with the findings of those studies, but we are talking millions upon millions of dollars of repairs that are needed to our buildings.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
And what my curiosity was is how much money right now of this free cash balance that is being utilized for capital, how much of it is being spent on building repair that I think it's clear that we need desperately, and I'm just questioning the level of commitment that we are making towards that goal. That's the question that I have.
Okay. So if I can clarify, just to kind of summarize what you're asking, if I understood it right, that you're asking how much is being put toward the necessary building repairs that we've kind of identified over the last several years. Did I understand correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McCall, would you care to answer that?
As opposed to most of the money going into equipment replacement.
Okay.
So, Mr. Smith, first of all, commented on the definition, which wasn't that much different from what I had said earlier. And actually, while I was here, I looked up what the DOR defines, the Department of Revenue defines. Capital item is something typically that's defined as a tangible asset or project that costs a certain threshold. They use $25,000. That's what I've used in the past, and a minimal lifespan, such as 5 years. So
Right.
we're not too far off.
Right.
So in this particular capital budget, if you look through, the vast majority are going to equipment. He's not wrong when he says that.
Right.
You know, we're trying to address some of the assets. We have the bridge repairs in there. We have the pavement maintenance in there. We're looking to go forward on a debt exclusion for the fire station.
Right.
As I get through this, councils have asked me to look at the facilities management studies.
Right.
So you can't do everything all at once.
No.
And it's evident from the number of studies that are here that these things have been looked at 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more in a row, and things weren't done. So it's an aggregation of things that have not been touched. So I've been here 7.5 months, and I'm trying, not understanding all of the processes. I'm used to a different type of capital management. We're trying to take care of some of the needs that are first and foremost. I mean, you've heard, I know Councilor Ryan has seen some of the vehicles. I've been in the fire station. Everybody has needs here, and we're trying to address some of the short-term, long-term as best as we can. And so, Councilor Marchetti had pushed the pavement management, and we're trying to find a solution to that. The next one down the line is facilities management. We're going to get to it. I can't do them all at once. I understand that there may not be a lot of those things being addressed here, but we are trying to address some of them on a larger scale. And we're waiting to see. There's a lot of things that could happen on the horizon. We're talking about some level of optimism, people coming back out of the pandemic. There's some pent-up desire to spend money. The president has already passed the ARPA funds. I had another conversation today. I've been in regular conversation with Congressman Neal's office. We're talking about funding for the fire station. I keep plugging with them, what information can they share with us relative to some of the infrastructure monies coming. We're having ongoing conversations with the USDA because they're going to get money from the ARPA program. And they're optimistic that there'll be a lot of money from Massachusetts next year that we'll be eligible for. So there's a lot of unknowns. We don't have the details, but we've already been led to believe that we're going to get $4.9 million through the ARPA program, and that's just for that first round. We don't have the details on how we're spending. I foresee us being able to utilize some of those funds to help us with our facilities projects. But again, we have to balance with the short-term needs, some of the vehicles, some of the other things. It's not easy. I can tell you that there are department heads that aren't really excited with some of the decisions we made. And I know that the chief wasn't exactly thrilled that we moved the forestry truck out, and he wanted to try and move the pumper truck back in. And I said at this point in time, I don't see that happening. But, again, we're trying to address them all fairly and equitably, and we're hoping that we get some opportunities to utilize these funds in direction, and we'll work on a plan for facilities management as soon as we get through this budget cycle. It's been asked, and we're committed to doing that. But going back to the very basic question that Mr. Speck asked, other than the schools, there really isn't a lot there for the town buildings at this point in time. But that's not to say that we haven't addressed things during the course of the year through grant monies. We've had to spend money to bring up the HVAC system over at the R&B so we can renew that contract. We've had Green Energy's grants to upgrade some of the heating and cooling systems in this building. So we're getting it addressed in a certain fashion, but yes, we need to get to a comprehensive solution through the facilities management plan.
Thank you very much. Oh, and just for clarification for anybody who might be watching, what's the ARPA program?
That's the American Rescue Plan Act, which was the first round of the $1.9 trillion that was passed by Congress, and I want to say the National League of Cities has provided information. People can find it on the Mass Municipal Association website, which is mma.org. If you look under ARPA, you could find a breakdown of what every city and town in the Commonwealth is getting, and you move over, we get direct aid coming to the town, and because there's no longer county government, the county monies will be apportioned to us as well for an aggregate of roughly $4.9 million.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else have questions or comments?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can I continue just for a second?
Okay.
What the town manager said, he's absolutely right that you can't do everything for once, and I think everybody understands that. But even based on what he said about the potential of monies coming in the future that we could possibly address some of our needs, I think it just spells out a greater need that we gotta come up with a plan on what we're gonna do to address whatever varying needs of these buildings require.
Yep.
You know, and I think that the important thing is that, you know, we don't want it to run into another pavement issue that, you know, we receive a study and then, you know, for 10 years we don't do anything about it. And I'm just saying that just so that, you know, we prevent that kind of thing from happening again. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And I think we're kind of all on the same page on that. I think that is, from what you were saying a few minutes ago, Mr. McCall, is that seems to be the next priority down the line. Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I had a couple other concerns about these schools' requests. Sorry, I'm speaking to the mic. For the public's knowledge, $643,000 out of the $1.2 million in the end, whatever, net, is
5.7 million.
yes, but that's, you got to reduce down, and, yeah. Let's not include some of the other stuff.
Right.
The actual free cash that we have to spend freely is $643,100,000 and change for the school's requests, 200,000 of that being the master plan study.
Yep.
And I would point out to Mr. Racine, while we did stop with the leases on the tablets because we had agreed to, I believe, 3 years at the time, you have put in for the, yes. And so that's nice that you picked them up, but you have put in for the electronic visual aid displays, projectors, monitors, et cetera, at $160,000. So, you know, we're still there. We're still, you know, on our books is still the request for electronics technology and such. So I just wanted to acknowledge that to the public for those who aren't familiar with what's going on the school side. And to the previous speaker's point, you know, there's the 100,000 to the, didn't point it out, the upgrade to the furnace at the DPW, so that was another capital investment. So that wasn't, yeah, I think I came up with 340,000 or so. So I still have problems with the school's requests. As I said, I have problems with that master plan personally, and a few other things, but we'll move forward with however we do that.
Okay.